Today I want to share a bit about sorcery accusation-related violence in my country, and we use that acronym SAV because when we talk about sorcery and sorcery-related violence, there's sometimes some confusion, and people start to talk about the act of sorcery and the violence that that sorcery can cause. Last night I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about today and just sort of trying to work out, okay, what should I speak about? And I got a text from a human rights defender that I work with at home. He's based in a province in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and he said to me that he had gone to another town to bring a woman who had been accused of sorcery and tortured back to her village in another province where she'd be reintegrated back into the community. So sorcery is, what is it? It's a belief that is quite prevalent in Papua New Guinea. So prior to Christianity and colonization, like in many other parts of the world, our people had their own ways of thinking about why misfortune happens, why people get sick, or why your crops are not yielding good, you know, these kinds of things, why your pigs die, or and this problem has exacerbated over the years. We have a majority of our people are rural. They live in quite rural, remote areas, a lack of education, poor health facilities, and so sometimes when an illness happens or somebody dies, people start to think about why something happened, and this accusation of sorcery occurs. It's a widespread belief. People who are educated believe in sorcery, and there's different sort of forms across the country, but what we are seeing in some parts is some quite horrific forms of violence, especially against women. Accusations happen across, you know, men, women, children, different age groups, but in terms of the accusations that happen for women, the women who are accused are often tortured, they're sometimes sexually violated, they have to leave, like men as well, they have to leave their villages. They're often women who marry into communities, so they're there working on land that is clan land of their husbands. So when they're displaced, they cannot really go and settle anywhere else. So I mentioned that story about this woman at the beginning. They can't settle anywhere else because about 80% of our land is customary owned. So you cannot go and just say I'm going to move and live somewhere else. So there are some real challenges around policing sorcery. Because it's a community, sorcery accusation related violence, it's a community sanctioned kind of action, which means that when the police try to respond, they have several challenges. Geographic challenges. In some places, they cannot go by road. You can only fly, which means they have to walk long distances. By the time they get there, it's quite late. They face issues around collecting evidence because people don't want to give evidence or don't want to say this person was behind this accusation, or these are the people that violated this woman, because they themselves can also have their security put at risk. So there's some really big complex challenges to policing this. In an ideal world, the police would go, they would collect the perpetrators or the suspects, arrest them, charge them, there'd be evidence. Those things don't happen at home because of what I just mentioned. So it's a dire situation for women. Some women, as I've mentioned, have to move. Then there have to be negotiations to reintegrate them back into their communities. But what we are seeing is that there are some very strong, powerful movements within communities themselves. Human rights defenders, some police officers who really go out of their way to work quite closely with human rights defenders. There has been some strong responses from the church, such as the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church, in trying to address this issue. And and there's community leaders, village court officials. So village courts, when we talk about this subject of informal and customary justice, this is a very important institution in our communities. Where the police don't go, the village courts are there. There's around probably around 1,600 village courts, maybe just over 16,000 officials, and they are there in the community. They are leaders, so they have the ability to stop accusations, to try and negotiate so that accusations don't lead on to violence. And we are finding that where community leaders, where village court officials, where churches work together, there's a coalition, the likelihood of stopping violence or stopping an accusation is stronger. So in terms of access and making justice accessible for women, there's that opportunity there to really work with local village court institutions, informal customary leaders, to try and get them to look at ways in which they can get their communities to find other ways to deal with their concerns around sorcery. So we had a Sorcery Act, which was the colonial law. This was repealed in 2013. And so you cannot use sorcery as a defense. But in the village court, you can, if you have concerns around sorcery, take your concerns to the village court. So we try to encourage people to find different ways. But what we are seeing with the research that I'm involved with colleagues from the Australian National University and Divine Word University in Papua New Guinea, is that the strength of community leadership, whether it be the village courts or customary leaders, is really important in trying to address this issue, because otherwise what we will have is that women are being accused and the stigma really sticks for the rest of their life. It's intergenerational as well. And then the violence happens. And then we're stuck, because you can't really have people sort of moving out of their villages. There's no, often very limited opportunity to have that police come in and arrest people. But I think when we talk about justice, this is a really important beginning step, by engaging with the people on the ground so that we have understanding, so that we have leaders in communities taking that very first stance and then communicating towards getting justice through the legal system with the police and others. Thank you very much.